Alison.
Yes, nice to meet you. Please have a seat.
Thank you. Hi, everybody.
Thank you, Governor, for being here.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you for being here, Alison. We appreciate Atlantic Magazine and also Google for helping to sponsor this along with other people. But we welcome you to Oklahoma.
Thank
and they were
you.
just telling me behind the stage that Atlantic Magazine is doing 3 of these, one in D.C., Los Angeles,
As well.
and in the heartland of America in Oklahoma. And we're the first.
Yes. I want to talk to you a little bit about your task force. I'm going to throw out a couple statistics, and then we're just going to have a conversation.
All right.
According to the task force you commissioned, that if Oklahoma stays on the course it is, by 2026, which scary enough is less than a decade away, Oklahoma's prison population will increase by 25% and 60% increase in the female population. So just let's start with an overarching question. What is the Oklahoma government's role in approaching this problem?
Well, of course, it's an issue that's very important to not only Oklahoma, but to America. To me, it's not a Republican or Democrat issue. It's an issue about success for individuals, success for their families. It's an issue about keeping the public safe from those who are dangerous criminals. And it's also about helping people who have addictions, maybe some mental health issues that need to be addressed that are not criminals, they're nonviolent, low-level offenders who just need a little extra help in society. And how can we find a better way, especially with being #1 in the nation, incarcerating women? I think the number is we're 165% higher than the national average in incarcerating women in Oklahoma, and the rate has been growing. And of course, we're #2 in overall incarceration of men and women in the nation, which is not something I'm proud of. And I jokingly say, we in Oklahoma don't have meaner women. Right, ladies? We don't have meaner women in Oklahoma. We just have some challenges that we need to help people with, such as substance abuse, addiction issues, maybe mental health issues. And so I've been trying to find a way over the years, many years, with a lot of extra help, as you heard the last panelist talk about, to educate our public, to look at best practices around the nation, to look what other states are doing, to find a better way to make sure we keep people that are dangerous locked up, but people who have low-level offenses that are nonviolent, to be able to find a better option, to be able to help them get the treatment and help that they need, and especially to divert them from going to prison in the first place.
Let's roll back a little bit of background from you. Can you remember a time in your life, not in your professional life perhaps, when you met a woman or someone's family who had someone in the family who was incarcerated? And what did you learn from that person?
Well, I can't say that I have met in my prior life to politics someone who had a member that was incarcerated. Now, I know people who are in my high school who are just acquaintances in the community, have addiction issues that were maybe picked up on some type of charge. And I have people, frankly, that I work with in state government that have a relative now that has alcoholism problems, maybe has some type of addiction to prescription drugs that are not dangerous, maybe dangerous to themselves because they're doing things they shouldn't be doing, but not a threat to the community itself or to other people. And so I think that's where a lot of my interest came in to helping on criminal justice issues, because there are a lot of people, as we know, we're having a big debate nationally about opioid abuse, prescription drug abuse, and how America is addicted to so many of our painkillers. And then when people get addicted, if they get really seriously involved in this stuff, then they can end up doing things to support their habits that could cause them to go to prison and potentially do things they shouldn't do.
What of those people that you have met who are attached or have some sort of association with incarceration in the Oklahoma prison system, what have they told you needs to be done? What have they confided in you about that?
Absolutely. And I've had the opportunity over the last many years, especially when I was lieutenant governor, I think it's where I really started focusing on this many years ago, was when I went to a Guthrie Center for women who had been sentenced from drug court into a program that would help them finish their education, get their GED, that would get them substance abuse treatment, counseling, that would talk to them about work skills, how to show up to work on time, how to take care of your children. You know, children lose trust sometimes in their parents if their parents have problems because mom and dad have their own issues they're dealing with. And this program would get them those things, and then they would integrate the children back into the home with the mother to live so that that bond and that trust could be reestablished. And in talking to those ladies, I can still remember sitting in kind of a circle with some chairs with about 8 women, and I asked them, I said, what's the most difficult thing for you? I mean, yes, you had some issues, you're dealing with them, but what's the most difficult thing for you? And they all said, the most difficult thing is being away from my children. It just kills me to be away from my children. And I want to get my life back in order so I can get a job, support them, put my family back together, and put my children on a better path. And when I was a young girl, my mother was a social worker, and there were times when she would, as a young girl, she would have to leave in the middle of the night to go pick up a child who was distressed in an abuse situation or maybe abandoned. And I can still remember those nights. My mother would go help that child and get him into some type of temporary home or even foster care at that time. And as it became from lieutenant governor to congresswoman to governor, then I began to see more of the effects of broken families and people who have substance abuse problems, people who are truly criminals that we need to keep locked up that are a danger, and then certainly the people who end up with lack of education and poverty on social welfare programs, foster care. We had over 11,000 children in foster care. Now we reduced it down to just a little under 9,000 because we're signing up more foster care families. But just the circle of problems that you have when you have people with challenges within their life.
Oklahoma has had this distinction of incarcerating women at a higher rate than the rest of the United States since 1991, so that's a good 26 years. And you've been in public office since 1990. Why have you taken an interest in this in the later years in your career, your political career right now?
Well, actually, it actually was not in my later years at all. I actually started working on this when I was lieutenant governor, and I worked with the status of the Commission of Women, and I was actually the chairman of looking at women incarcerated. We held many public forums during that time. We issued a report back during that time with recommendations to the legislature. But frankly, it's hard to get people to really delve into criminal justice issues because I think in the past, and I was a former legislator, as you mentioned, back in 1990, it was kind of taboo to talk about criminal justice reform. And that was during an era when we went through as a nation the 3 strikes, you're out type of mantra. And so then I became lieutenant governor. I went on to Congress, and then I came back home, and then as governor, I've been working on this about the past 4 to 5 years now. It's not something I started this year, but 4 to 5 years. But it's been hard to get the legislature, and frankly, a lot of our law enforcement people are certainly starting to pick up the understanding that there are other options of how you treat people that are low-level offenders, and that we need to keep our prisons for those who are dangerous to society.
To your point, the National Council on Crime and Delinquency talked about, they have a really interesting statement about why punitive measures are different from state to state, and I want to read this to you. It's a little bit long. I'll try to not stretch it out. Differences in punitiveness are more likely explained by the laws, policies, and practices and beliefs and attitudes of elected officials and the public influencing each state's response to crime. So I want to take the first part of that. What laws, policies, and practices have led to Oklahoma incarcerating so many women?
Well, like I said, it goes back into the 80s, the 90s, when the United States had a lot of laws, the 3 strikes you're out, that were put into place, the belief that you need to put people in for longer prison sentences. I know as I became governor, I used to do every single parole that came through my office. The law required that I look at everything, no matter what the offense was. They've changed it now to where it's more serious offenses and low-level offenses just go to the Pardon and Parole Board. But I would be sitting there every single week looking through 200 to 300 applications, and I would read these backgrounds of how do people get into this situation. And one of the things that I found was the inconsistency throughout the decades in sentencing. There were people who would have possession of some sort, and they might be sentenced to life in prison. And that was one of the things that we worked hard to change the past couple of years. And once again, it takes a while to change that attitude in your state and to educate the public so they don't give the elected officials a hard time when it comes to a re-election. Frankly, I'm just being frank about this. But that's why when State Question 780 and 781 passed by about 65%, because there were a lot of people, including myself, former Speaker Chris Still, some of the district attorneys, and other civic leaders that have been speaking here today, that have been talking about the results of not reforming your criminal justice system. And we're not the only state in the nation that's done this. I mean, I was looking at a list of states that have recently done criminal justice reform. You've got Texas, Georgia, South Dakota, Utah, Florida, Kentucky, South Carolina, Kansas, Arkansas, excuse me, and Mississippi. And you know what? Those are all conservative states. So when I went back to say it's not a Democrat or Republican issue, it's an American issue that, you know, families have to deal with substance abuse, addiction, poverty, a child out of a home because a parent may have some type of mental health crisis going on in their life. And I've asked crowds this throughout the years when I've spoke about criminal justice reform. Is there anybody in this room that has not known someone that's had some type of substance abuse issue? Whether it's been someone in high school, someone you might work with, someone you know in the community, or someone has a relative, and nobody ever raises their hand that they don't know somebody. And so I think the more we talk about this as a nation, which we have, the more we can help change the laws and change legislation.
So that goes to the second part of that statement about attitudes and beliefs. Talk to me a little bit about how do you approach criminal justice reform in a conservative state, and you are a true conservative, where one of the mantras of being a true conservative is tough on crime. How do you do criminal justice reform and maintain being tough on crime and maintain your true conservative roots?
Well, I think I've proven that that can be done. And if you look at Texas, who is one of the leading states from years past, and everybody likes to talk about Texas and how they reduced their incarceration rate, but yet they haven't seen an increase in crime. They've reduced the need for prison beds. I think it's a matter of talking about how do you be smart on crime, but also tough on crime for those who might harm you. Nobody wants a murderer out there running around, or someone that's a rapist or sex offender or something like that out in their state. But like I said, we all know there are people who might be off their medication, might have some type of alcohol or substance abuse treatment. And there are times when you have to, when you have a friend or you have a relative and said, that's enough, you know, you have to interrupt what's going on in their life so that they will change and get their life back on a more useful, productive path.
This is interesting. I obviously doing research for this, and I was reading the website The Daily Caller, which is a conservative website. It's founded by Tucker Carlson and Neil Patel, who was Vice President Cheney's one of his assistants, and they wrote about, they've been following you and your criminal justice reform, and I read the comments section, and it was interesting. And the headline of this particular article was, "Governor Pushes Against Female Incarceration." And here were some of the responses. "Seems sexist to me, why only women? Women want equality with all the easy stuff, not the hard stuff like doing hard time for the crimes you commit. I'm all for criminal justice reform, but not just softer for women."
Well,
what's your response to that?
You know, I don't read my own Facebook. I would advise you not to read yours either half the time, especially when you're in public office, you don't. Because there are a lot of people who will say things, but I haven't been pushing just for women, frankly. I mean, yes, we are #1 in the nation, and frankly, as a woman, that's a great concern. And I'm a woman, I'm trying to do something about it. I don't see anything wrong with that. But I'm also addressing criminal justice in a broad sense. I mean, I don't just talk about women. I've been invited to a couple of women's events. This is the second one. And we launched our first one nationally called Women Unshackled, which was a couple of months ago. We had a great response to that. But my policies aren't just aimed at women, it's aimed at the issue. How do we be smart on crime? How do we have ways to divert people from going to prison? There are some great programs in Oklahoma, the mental health courts, the drug courts, the family courts, the veteran courts. Those are all things I pushed for many, many years. And we have programs like Remerge, which is here in Oklahoma City, Women in Recovery, which is a great program, the HERS program. We have 3 crisis centers. We only had 1 in Oklahoma when I started office. I put in money to have 3 crisis centers in our state. We have coordination. We never had coordination between corrections and mental health. I mean, think about that. A lot of the problems that people face when they may end up in the system is because they're dealing with mental health issues, but we didn't have a system to where we actually assess what is going on in this person's life. What's the real cause of this? And so now mental health does a risk assessment with our Department of Corrections, and it is working, much better. It helps on recidivism. It helps on diverting people. And we got great statistics on keeping people out of the system once they go through Emerge or Women in Recovery type programs.
Let's talk about your task force, the 27 recommendations that were made. Out of the recommendations, which ones did you read and say, yes, I think we can accomplish that in Oklahoma, and which ones did you read and think, that is going to hit resistance?
Well, we had, I put a task force together. They worked, over a year. So it wasn't something we just took a month and said, okay, let's just do this, this, and this, and let's go for it. I mean, it was thoughtful, intense study that we took national surveys. We were the Pew Foundation, some other organizations. The Criminal Justice Network helped us also on that study. We had judges, we had DAs, we had criminal defense attorneys, we had mental health counselors, we had corrections, we had victims' rights groups, and we took a combination of many, many different entities to get a broad-based look, and to be fair to everyone that's involved in the system, and there's a lot of people involved in the system that it touches organizationally and nonprofit-wise, and certainly state and federal government. And they came out with recommendations because our prison population is expected to go at the rate that we're incarcerating people and sentencing people, 25% over the next 10 years. That's a lot of people. Like I said, we're already number 2 in the nation on men and women incarcerated, number 1 in women, and it's a path of failure. If we don't help people that are nonviolent, low-level offenders stay out of the system and go maybe to a mental health court, a drug court, a family court, whatever crisis it is, help with the risk assessment to get them to the right programs, we're going to keep putting people in this generational curse of poverty that just doesn't work for our state.
Are the preventative measures the ones you think you can get?
Yes, I've been trying to put more money. In fact, the first couple of years I was in office, I put, I think it was about $16 million more into mental health. Mental health had been one of those agencies that legislature typically hadn't particularly wanted to ever plus up or fund more. We funded 2 new crisis centers. We started doing more coordination between corrections and mental health. We did the first Pay for Success program. It passed in 2014. We had initiated it to pay for a nonprofit group, the Women in Recovery group in Tulsa, which has been very successful.
That's the Women in Recovery?
Yes, Women in Recovery, very successful, that instead of sending women to prison, if they agreed to go through this program, we would pay as a state, which is a lot cheaper, by the way, than sending them to prison, to put them into this program, and if they stayed clean, stayed out of prison, then we would pay on the backside to reimburse that nonprofit. It's a partnership, the first of its kind in the nation, that we are doing, and I have great hopes for it, and I think it's going to be very successful.
One of the things in the task force report that caught my eye was on page 4, and it described what the task force was charged with. And the first thing, criminal justice corrections and policy reform. Number 2 is to identify cost-effective, evidence-based sentencing, holding offenders accountable but reducing recidivism. 3, estimating resulting savings from the recommendations. And 4, identifying opportunities to reinvest the savings into policies and to reduce recidivism, right, and improve reentry outcomes. I found it interesting, 3 of those talk about finance and money. Does this come down to money?
Well, certainly if you can save taxpayers' money, if you can put someone in a productive job, supporting their families and keep those children with their families instead of having to go into prison or being incarcerated. It is about money. It's about money for the success of that person, to be able to support themselves, be a contributing member to society. It's about being wise with your money. If there's a better program that helps people get on the right track by getting their GED, getting counseling, substance abuse, some vocational skills. We also have vocational training that can help people once they're released from prison, which I think is very important too. And we need, by the way, we need money, more money for all those things. There's never enough money. But there has been this movement to help divert people, to provide them with substance abuse, diversionary programs, to work with private nonprofit successful programs that have very low recidivism rate. Yes, that is a major goal. So yes, in a sense, it is about being smart on crime, smart with your money, and protecting the public at the same time.
While you've been able to get certain reforms through, other ones have stalled, and I know you had some pushback from some of the representatives, and I got a letter which describes some of your reforms in this way. I believe it's from Representative Biggs. He said, this past session, a package of bills regarding reckless criminal justice reform was introduced by the governor and considered by the legislature. Why would he call these reckless?
Well, everybody's allowed to have their personal opinion. I'm about good policy, and I'm about trying to find things that will help people be successful, yet protect the public. I don't think there's anybody in this world that says, well, let's not worry about people, let's just let them out and hope for the best. Nobody thinks that, and I certainly don't think that. We, as I've said many, many times, we want to be smart on crime, but yet we want to keep people who are of a danger to society, or even a danger to themselves. I mean, there are just some people that get out of control, and they need to be put in some type of program to help them get their life back in order or get straight. But
how do you work around this, though?
Oh, I go to the media. I go to things like this. I go to the public.
Public support?
Yeah, public support is very, very important, and I push back. I mean, I asked him to come to my office this week and talk to me about this letter, so. You know, and I told him, I said, look, you want to do the same things I want to do. You want to keep the public safe. I want to keep the public safe. I just think there's a better way of dealing with low-level, nonviolent offenders. If you have challenges, as he mentioned in that letter, with some of the languages, and I guess maybe he misunderstood some of the task force recommendations. He kept referring to some other statute which had nothing to do with what we were trying to do. Maybe I'll just assume it was not intentional to put it that way. But, you know, I said, we're willing to work with you. We want to keep people safe, too. There is nothing in my bones that says we don't want people to be safe. You know, but we can help people be diverted from the system. We can help people with substance abuse issues. We can keep our children out of foster care. We can help men and women who have these issues, and we can be smarter with our money and invest in programs that will actually make a difference.
You had that list of states which have gone through criminal justice reform in some way. You're promoting this. I know you're a supporter of the president. His attorney general has a very different point of view about this.
Yeah, I need to have a discussion with him.
Excuse me?
I need to have a discussion with him.
I was going to ask you, had you, and do you plan to?
No, I haven't had a chance to talk to Attorney General Sessions, but I would welcome the opportunity to talk to him about some of the successful things that we're doing and some of the successful things that other states are doing. And as I mentioned earlier, all the states I listed a few moments ago are conservative states that think there are better ways to help America be successful and safe.
In an op-ed in Tulsa World, this is my last question, the writer wrote, "We are a fiercely conservative state and change comes slowly in Oklahoma, but the thaw in our frozen thinking about criminal justice has begun." Why do you think the thaw has begun?
Well, I think because of Chris Steele, who's done a wonderful job with teen ministries. The district attorney from Tulsa, has done a good job. He explained that. You had Mrs. Spockrow, to say that right, who talked a few moments ago about her experience in the system, and the investment of concerned individuals into programs like Remerge and Women in Recovery, the HERS program, and there's a lot of them out there. The district attorneys that have set up mental health courts, the drug courts, the family courts, the veterans courts, those people who are starting to invest in that. And I hear the DAs, they need more money. I hear that. And I hear the DAs that they want us to put more money towards treatment programs and community sentencing and other alternatives, so that we don't have to send people into a system where they really do end up with some pretty bad people that could show them other ways that we might not want them to see.
I said that was my last question, but I fibbed. I have one more. For the average person who's listening to this and lives in this state and says, I want to live in a safe state, I'm living a good life, I'm doing the right thing, what's in it for them to support criminal justice reform? Well,
first of all, like I said, we need to save our beds, our prison beds, and our money. It's you know, close to $30,000 to incarcerate somebody, and it's taxpayer money. We pay for that, but we want to save those beds for those who are dangerous to society, that are true criminals, that are violent, that need to be put away to keep us safe in our homes and our businesses. But for those who have, like I said, I'm going to keep repeating it, low level of offenses.
But for the average person, what's in it for them?
What's in it for them is that their communities are safe, and that, heaven forbid, if they should ever have a friend, a daughter, a son, a mother, a father, a veteran that returns back from war, a person that goes and has surgery on their knee and they're taking some oxycodone and all of a sudden they're a normal person, all of a sudden they're having problems and not thinking straight. What's in it for them is that we're focusing on programs that can be smart to help their loved ones, but yet keep them safe.
Governor Fallin, thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming today and participating.